Well, we are back. Panelists here, lots to chew over. Eddie Glaude, chair of the Center for African American Studies at Princeton University, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Kasie Hunt, the New York Times columnist Maureen Dowd, and Stephen Moore, editorial board member at the Washington Times and a former senior economic advisor to the Trump campaign. Welcome all. Good to see the two of you. We haven't seen you guys in a while. Maureen, I'm going to start with you. Comey and Trump. What do you make? Is this Javert-like? Is this Les Mis-like in your mind?
Well, with Macron this week, we saw Trump's primate male dominance moves, which he also tried on Comey. You asked Comey about why he didn't speak back to Trump. And Comey is a very fascinating figure for Washington because usually you get in trouble from an absence of rectitude, and he's in trouble from too much rectitude. You know, his tortuous explanations, he can't see that what he did was wrong because he's so wrapped up in his image of himself at Ashcroft's bedside and as being the honest man that he can't see that it's about his image. But, you know, the funny thing about Comey is that it's such a great troll because he's becoming rich and selling all these books to Trump haters when they blame him for not making Hillary president. Hillary says he shivved her.
Stephen, what'd you hear?
Look, the last thing he said to you was that, I want to make sure I get this exactly right, that the FBI is committed to values and honor. I think this man has so politicized the FBI and really besmirched the reputation of the FBI with this salacious book that was so personal. I agree that it should have come out after the investigation. And look, I think from people on the right, like me, I don't think he has any credibility anymore. And I agree with you. This is all about selling books. And, you know, he is, you know, I've said this before, but, you know, hell hath no fury like an FBI director scorned. And this is personal. You know, he comes across as just a personal animosity to Trump. And I don't think the book is going to have a lot of lasting influence.
Eddie?
Well, I think you can hold two claims at once. That is to say that he's trying to sell books, and that he is absolutely right about the claim that he doubts the credibility of Trump. That Trump has proven over and over again a propensity to have an uneasy relationship with the truth. He lies.
At a minimum.
I thought it was interesting. He admitted that he went into his first ever meeting with him questioning whether that he was ever going to be truthful.
Right. So
he prejudged.
Right. So no matter what our political leanings are, whether you're a Trump supporter or a Trump critic, I think the facts of the matter are very clear. Trump lies. And Comey's book, whether it's to sell money or whatever, is making very, very clear that the man is...
If you believe them.
I really can't tell anymore, honestly, which camp hates James Comey more. Is it the people that worked for Hillary Clinton or people who are now Trump supporters? And, I mean, this book feels like one of the many political biographies that, you know, politicians put out about themselves. This is James Comey selling himself as the embodiment of honor and loyalty and the opposite of everything on both sides of the aisle. And I'm curious, you know, his poll numbers have whipsawed back and forth among Republicans and Democrats. I mean, he was one of the most hated figures by Democrats during the campaign. That's since jumped back around. I'm interested to see if he comes out of this with any.
Well, see, this is exactly my point, though, even, you know, going back to the email investigation. I mean, his treatment of that, in my opinion, was total, and I say this as a Republican, and it did help Trump win the election, but the way he treated the whole email investigation was political, in my opinion.
Bob Mueller still has some positive views as far as the public is concerned. And I thought this poll here, if I were the president, I'd be concerned here. Views of the Mueller investigation from Fox News here. Will Mueller find President Trump committed crimes or impeachable offenses? A majority, 56%. But what was interesting here is more than 1 in 5 Republican voters now believe. And you could say maybe they're the never Trump Republicans that believe this, Maureen. But that shows you that Mueller has kept his credibility. Comey may be challenged. Mueller still is not.
Well, I think, again, this is one of the most fascinating kind of personality collisions that Washington has ever seen. You've got this former Marine, Boy Scout, you know, completely straight arrow, and then you've got Trump, you know, who is the opposite of that.
I want to get into the investigation a little bit. We know the president got fixated about Michael Cohen, and he wanted to make it clear Michael Cohen's businesses. And then this pops up. over the weekend in grocery stores. The front page of the National Enquirer, we know the president has a personal relationship with the owner of the National Enquirer, and there it is, Trump's fixers, secrets and lies. Kasie Hunt, do you see, I mean, this looks like the beginning of the president's attempt to separate from Michael Cohen.
We've been watching this almost play out in public, the president trying to decide if he's going to try and essentially dismantle Michael Cohen or if he's going to try to cozy up to him in the attempt to make sure that he doesn't essentially side with Bob Mueller and give up everything. And it seems as though we are moving in the opposite direction, that the assumption is now that Michael Cohen is likely to flip. He wants to avoid prison, so they have to mount a campaign to undermine his credibility.
Steve Moore, how concerned should Trump supporters be about Michael Cohen?
Look, I thought the raid on Cohen's office was a bridge too far for this investigation.
Do we know that, though? I mean, we don't know why they did it. We don't know the evidence
most
yet.
fair-minded people think it was pretty outrageous to it was an invasion of civil liberties. But I want to go back to this point you made, which is really, I think, an important one about, how many Republicans believe that Trump is in trouble. I think the reason that this report that came out by the Republicans in Congress about the investigation saying there was no collusion is a really important point here, because it basically is saying this is now a partisan, the only way that they're going to get Trump is what happened after Watergate when Republicans turned on Nixon. That's not happening now. I think it's become it's being portrayed as a partisan witch hunt against Trump, and I actually happen to believe that's true.
Well, the House Republicans made it more partisan, therefore it makes it partisan?
No, it just means
I'm sort of confused by that logic.
Unless Democrats can convince Republicans that there's something here, then I don't think the investigation is going to work.
And that's what's interesting about the 1 in 5, right? Even though 1 in 5 may believe that he has committed impeachable offenses, do they care? Right? Do they care if will they hold him accountable for it? I don't think they will.
Well, and I think that's part of why the way this conversation is going is so potentially dangerous, because you say this invasion of Cohen's office was an invasion of his civil liberties. We don't have all the facts to know that. Yeah, I mean, we are supposed to be a country that operates under the rule of law, and now nobody believes the same set of facts. The people who are in public office are undermining our institutions that apply the rule of law. Right. I mean, is it possible that Republicans will ever change their minds because they have a completely different set of facts?
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.